So, Dane.
What's happening, brother?
Long time coming.
Long time coming, exactly.
Before we get into it, I just want to say to everyone listening, welcome to the Mind Your Business podcast, shortened to MYB for obvious reasons. Yeah, man. So, really, this podcast, why? It was born out of the frustration of really drawing the lines of between what happens geopolitically and socio-economically and how that affects our culture day to day. You know, whether you're one of the man them on the road or if you're, you know, you work a normal job, whatever it is you're doing, you know.
And and this help with some overstanding, as we say in our community. keep people overstanding. Like, I guess we want to be able to discuss things like politics and economics for people who don't have the time to do that or feel like these things don't concern them because people that look like us are normally left out of these conversations.
There is, and this is just one instance of it. We will get into many other instances because what we're here to do is discuss problems and come with solutions.
Yeah, well, I think that it's a good point to bring us on to because you're not trying to scaremonger people, and we don't want everyone to think, oh, the world's against you and blah blah. I mean, there is elements of problems, and those are more for, I would say, problems of reasons of jealousy and envy, and also complete ignorance in a lot of cases. Because you say when black people come in the room, I think in my experience, even when people have not had no intentions of being racially offensive, because the media gives such a one-dimensional image of blackness and what black people are, I can see non-black people when they meet me, if I'm on stage or come off stage, people don't even know how to relate to you. They think, oh, what can I even talk to this black person about? What black reference so they might be like, yeah, well, I support Arsenal. Even when I love Ian Wright. I want you to know that. And, you know, people struggle that much because they've been... Because a lot of the time when you even see black people in the media, the only time we are given a platform is to discuss nothing other than race.
Yeah.
So that's one of the problems is in very rare cases that you even get to see black people discussing their experience along the lines of anything other than race. So then it means that audience that view that is that mean if you got to talk to a black person, you better acknowledge that they're black first. And that's not necessarily how the conversation goes. My advice would be, in a solution I would say, is that we should have people that can regularly poll black people, taxpayers, people in this country, and hear about their experience. And I think that to give a much more accurate depiction of what it's like being a black person living in the UK today. But I would definitely advise people to take any reports on race from mainstream media with a pinch of salt, because we know the people that are being chosen to represent us aren't necessarily us. What we spoke about before is like the method of whitewashing that's used by some publications. So what you find is, so another GB News presenter called Dominic Samuels. She has done columns for the tabloids, and one time the tabloids, I can't remember if it was the Daily Mail, but one of the right-wing ones, they wrote a disparaging article about the carnival, but they put her name there.
Right, yeah.
She was like, I didn't write that. I that's not what I think, because I go to carnival and I enjoy it. But they will offer money to black pundits. An example of someone who's definitely done it is like, I think it's Nana Akua, who's also on GB News. Okay. And she's happy to put her name to stuff that's disparaging about black people because they'll pay her. And this is what we need to make sure we do. My solution is, you know, if you see a person who writes a column or a black person says something, check their credentials and follow that money and see who's paying them to say what they're saying. Yeah. Because I think the issue is that because we don't have a lot of control of our media platforms outside the digital space, then those can get manipulated and we can get very poor representations of ourselves. So
yeah, I mean, this is the thing. GB News, I don't know, like Sonia. I would only imagine there's only a subsection of our community and culture that consume that anyway.
Well, I don't think it might be more people nowadays. But yeah, I agree with you. I feel like not a lot of us would consume it, but I don't just think just GB News. I think that it's just the news across the board.
Yeah. And that's something we need to be aware of. That, you know, if we see something like you said, where, you know, a black person may be saying something disparaging towards our community and culture, it's not necessarily, or check the credentials, like you said. Yeah, and
also
follow the money.
We want to give you some stats and stuff. Like, I always want to just give people things just to remember in your head a lot of the time. That, for example, just as many people, if not more people, die at Glastonbury every year. People get
you know what, we're gonna get into it. Yeah, we're gonna get into
so don't even worry.
Like, because all right then, so you know what, let's not be rude. Actually, let's introduce ourselves. You get me? And we've just gone straight in, and that is probably a follow-on from what we've been discussing.
Yeah,
so,
for a long time.
Guys, excuse the energy. It's just what you get me, what we do. But anyway, Dane.
So yeah, Dane Baptiste. I'm a comedian, writer. I've been a presenter as well. I do stand-up comedy for about 14 years now. Done shows in America, done shows in Australia. I performed in South Africa, Finland. So I've been way up north, as white as it gets, right down in Africa as black as it gets as well. So I've travelled a lot and doing comedy. I've done some social commentary on like shows like LBC and BBC Radio 5 and stuff. But yeah, just all of that.
And I am Index. I am a regular guy who works a regular job and just wants to find some problems and solutions to problems that I have. So the second thing I wanted to get into, which is something that you told me about actually, because I wasn't fully aware of it, saw it on the news but didn't pay much attention, and I don't want to pronounce his name wrong, or does he need that kind of respect? Axel Ruda Cabana.
Yes. For those who don't know, Axel Ruda Cabana was the perpetrator of the, I suppose at this point we'll call it a massacre or mass killing, which resulted in the death of 3 young girls. I think were all under the age of 9. In Southport, which was the catalyst for the misinformation that followed online, which led to race riots throughout the UK. He's very recently been sentenced to 52 years for his crimes, and it's now become a very high-profile and very highly politicized story within the press, and has become a massively divisive story, a very polarizing one, where some people are saying that this is the result of unchecked immigration that's led to this. Others have argued that it's the culture of misogyny that radicalizes young men online that's caused this. And, some people have said, that this is a problem with our community and that we should really be looking inwards as to the violence that is become very normalized in terms of stabbings and knife crime within our community. So, yeah, it's
quick question. Who would you say is more prevalent in kind of saying our community need to look in regarding the normalization of violence and so forth and so on?
I think
who have you seen kind of shouting that message?
I think that a lot of it's come from right-wing media, but it's also, there's been a lot of reactive behavior from the government where they have had accusations levied against them by, among many people, Elon Musk. And this is, and because of Elon Musk's control of platforms like X, formerly Twitter, this has panicked or forced the Prime Minister to feel like he has to respond, because there's been a lot of talk about this being a government cover-up, and that there is some level of racial bias, or what people are calling two-tier policing. And so there's been calls from our external institutions, whether it's law enforcement or the government, have spoken to about our community, whether it's the immigrant community or the black community. And obviously this in turn has led to, black people also, for some reason, internalizing this kind of guilt or this collective responsibility. And then the whole thing begins about like, what are we going to do about knife crime and blah, 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 which is funny because knife crime is supposed to be, people talk about that and they conflate it with living in London, but this happened in Southport, which is nowhere near London. So, I mean, it's obviously a massive tragedy, and Axel Ruda Cabana seems to be a very sick individual, psychologically definitely sick, and
so mental health has nothing to do with this, no?
No, has mental health it's a good point. That's a good point. Yeah. But his mental health he has a very poor mental health, and so probably should not be in society. And by the sounds of it, his parents definitely tried to alert the authorities on 3 separate occasions to his very troubling and questionable behaviour, and they did not receive adequate care. Right.
So, I mean, begs the question whether if he was white, whether he would have had the same kind of, or the relevant care afforded to him. I don't know. I'm not educated across that space enough.
I think it's a question of, this is an issue that is not just of race, it's of class.
Right.
And I say that because I think that if he came from a different socioeconomic group as well as being of a different race, I think that there would have been people on a global basis, because there seems to be people globally getting involved in this, there would have been a lot more clemency given to him and people trying to explain his behaviour.
And I think it's good that you mentioned that, because again, as part of what we're doing and what we're discussing it from the guise of our community. You know what I mean? Like through the lenses of being two black men. You know what I mean? And obviously, we'll have other people on and whatnot. But the point being is, when you mention class as well, this is also a massive issue. Class is
a massive issue within the UK, and I feel like a lot of people don't. People try to co-opt class and race when it suits them, but I've always said in the UK we have what's called a placism problem, and that means that both race and class combine as tools of discrimination.
Yeah.
Because you can be a black person of a particular class. Like if you come from another country, but you've trained as a doctor or a surgeon or an engineer, that would put you in a different class in the UK based on our occupational hierarchy we have. But when you come here, if you're from a certain country, your qualifications will not be recognized. And so this is why so many, continental African immigrants had to drive cabs or work as cleaners, even though they were overqualified for these jobs and were, had medical qualifications. Because of the UK's racial and class discrimination, it's no good here.
And this is the point. Even so, like when you're in the ends, areas that we're from, the man them are black, white, Asian, because that's the classism system that you're kind of within. You know what I mean? All of you have had similar level of education, coming from similar economic backgrounds. You know what I mean? So,
and that's a good point, because you discussed saying about mental health. Mental health, so far as how it affects working class communities, whether they're white, black or Asian, it's massively overlooked. And this is the thing, is that like growing up as a black youth in the ends, can't tell people you're depressed. How would you define your depression? Or if you show signs of depression, people aren't even paying attention to it.
Yeah.
Like it's not spoken out within our communities. And I don't look at our community as that's necessarily something that's problematic. I think that's a reaction to the fact that the mental health care system has not been that great for a long time. Like, obviously, there is help available now, but in the 70s, if you was a person of color or a working class person and you had a psychotic episode, you had a nervous breakdown, you suffer from panic attacks, I cannot see you getting any help. Like, therapy, in terms of people even having access to therapy, particularly the working class, that's only happened very, very recently. And, when I think back to when my parents were in school, I don't think anyone my dad's age could be like, well, the thing is, I'm on the autistic spectrum, and that's why I struggle to... They're sending you to centre, bro, if you're lucky. Or you're being expelled. And we don't take into account things like anxiety and depression and attention deficit disorder. These things weren't taken into account, particularly when it comes to young black men. And I think this has a direct effect on like expulsion rates and our access to education. And also, our communities aren't necessarily that educated about it. We have not only largely formed a workforce that takes care of a lot of middle class white people, because you don't see a lot of white people working in homes or working in youth clubs or, any kind of outreach of that nature. A lot of black people used to do that. And so black people have been taking care of the infirm of others, as well as, and then trying to take care of our own families with a distinct lack of resources. And so it's an interesting thing when we talk about mental health and stuff, because dealing with institutional and systematic racism must have an effect on us.
Well, you know
and
what?
We don't even discuss it.
There is that. There is definitely that. But also, and this is going back to Axel Ruda Cabana, what I find funny is that people have related it directly to his race and what could almost be deemed as the normalization of violence within the community. And there's so many things that happen to kind of push that. So, for years, people have been talking about what the music that's being pushed from our community and what's being glorified, and it makes money, so it's not a problem.
Yeah.
You get what I mean?
I mean,
before we even move forward on that, you have also the fact that when you're talking about anxiety, stress, depression, leading into mental health, because everybody's got mental health, but it's the ill mental health we're talking about specifically.
Yeah.
one of the other strands that I wanted to add to this conversation was the other day, funnily enough, I was reading a report about anxiety. No, it wasn't about anxiety and stress. It was about the amount of information people consume. So 1900s now, obviously that's a long time ago. 1900s, we were spending, on average, 10% of our waking hours consuming information. In 2025, we're now spending, on average, 80% of our waking hours consuming information. Now, I personally don't believe the human brain was built to be doing that. You get what I'm saying?
Absolutely,
so my point being, the reason why I mentioned that is because when you go back to these issues with Axel and other issues, that is, people are so quickly to kind of deem it on race and say, it's a problem with them.
Yeah, it's very easy just to wrap it up.
It's a human thing. You get what I'm showing you? Like,
it's definitely a human thing, but there are external factors. None of the factors are racial, because anyone that's trying to apply racial science is a liar, innit? Because race is not a thing. Something that's made up. So to try and apply science to that makes no sense. Because this idea that the darker you are, the more violent you are makes no sense, because I don't see no albino gangs running around and they're still black people. For me, I've seen a lot of people trying to weaponize this whole thing and be like, what about the violence in your communities? And this is the worst thing that's ever happened. It's not, I don't like to compare tragedies, but the idea that there's not been, first of all, when you've got people like Elon Musk talking about violence, school shootings happen in America every day. And it involves children who are the same age as the poor victims that died in Southport. There is no talk about addressing the violence within American society, because the NRA will shut it down and they'll lobby the required people they need to lobby, and politicians.
And it's not related to race either.
And it's not related to race either.
You get what I mean?
America has exactly.
That's the more, for me,
that's race.
Like, you can't bring race into the conversation when it's white person going and shooting up a school. We're not having the same conversation. Do you get what I mean?
I have never heard a pundit, a activist, a journalist, editor ever say we need to address the problem with white men after Dunblane happened. Because that was a massacre with children. And the person that did it was a man who was a convicted sex offender who was able to work in the Cub Scouts. And when he lost his job, that's when he went on this killing spree. And I've never seen anybody, when that whole thing happened, be like, we need to address the issue of violence within the community of white men. Same thing, almost nearby, James Bolger.
And this is the thing. So
one of the people that did that to James Bolger is free now, back on the roads.
Crazy.
And we don't know where they are. And we didn't find out what Jimmy Savile did until he died.
You get me?
He was long gone before that come out.
Mad.
You know what I'm trying to say to you?
Mad.
But when that happened, he was able to do that.
We're going to cover that as well, because there's other crimes that happen internationally where. Anyway, we'll get into that.
So my thing is this: when they talk about, like, within our community, I just don't want our community to fall for this okie doke, because we can begin to internalize this idea that we're predisposed to be violent people, and that is a lie. Because there's no guns made in no African countries.
But this is my point. So again, this is the reason why we're here. This is the reason why we're having this discussion, is because essentially we are afforded no protection.
None.
Do you get what I mean? And the reason why we're not afforded no protection, in my opinion, is because we don't have enough financial clout collectively, which feeds into political clout.
Absolutely.
And then we can rain down from top and say, actually, those people over there, leave them alone, like other communities do. I'm not even mad at it. I'm saying that we need to get better at understanding the dynamics and the connection between business, money, and politics, and how that affects our social economics and our day-to-day just getting on with shit.
Here's the thing. Scarface himself said, Tony Montana said, money, then the power, then the women. Problem is, we keep jumping 2 stages and doing what women. And that in itself is another problem for us to discuss. But I would say that, for me, it's important that we do not internalize this suggestion from the media or from dominant culture that we have to take collective accountability for the actions of an individual. Because even in the whole idea of trying to levy this collective responsibility, it's been nothing but misinformation and like, there's been suggestions that Axel Cabana's dad was a part of a Rwandan militia during the Rwandan genocide, when the opposite's true. Some people have tried to say he was born in Rwanda. That's not true. And it's funny that now people can bring up Rwanda now. I saw you. Were you trying to send people there? So I thought it was safe to send people there, but now it's full of killers. So which one is it?
I mean, I think it's I'm pretty sure it's the Rwandan army that's in the Congo now, trying to displace people for them.
And who do you think is bankrolling that for them?
Right, then you get what I mean. So yeah. Anyway, that's a whole different scenario.
I just think it's a very tragic thing, as you said, and I just think that it's these things they will always get politicized for gain, and at a time now where you're living in a country where they are trying to find as much distractions as they can to make people forget that during this pandemic they thieved a bag of money from us, and we saw the biggest transfer of wealth we've ever seen. But to stop people, particularly working class white people, from realizing who their enemy is, they keep putting these enemies in front of them, as they have been since the 40s and Windrush.
You know, here's the thing, and this is, I'm gonna ask this question a lot, because this is gonna be the premise on which we continue this podcast. Do we give a shit as a culture, as a community? Do we give a shit? Are we just gonna, like, every 2-3 years when something happens, when some black woman gets boxed down in an Asian hair shop? Like,
it's a good question. I think we do give a shit, but I think it's a very there is a lack of fairness, I think, because I mean, it is what it is and we can't change it, but I think that it's very important that
when you say you can't change it, what do you mean by that?
We can't change that. Whether you are Jamaican, Trinidadian, Ghanaian, you are politicized and grouped together despite how different your life experiences are. Like, now, whether you're Somali, Eritrean, they will put us all together despite the fact that Somali culture versus something like Trinidadian culture can be
worlds apart.
But we'll be put together. And because of that, then we have to take this collective responsibility. And that can be very difficult, because when we talk about, for example, crime within our community, it's a very, very small minority of people that may be involved in criminality for whatever reason. Now, if we, for a lot of historic reasons, are in those same communities, we cannot escape the violence and we cannot escape the whole thing. But it's very different for us, because it's like, you can be a black person, and because of where you live, you might be predisposed to experience violence, or have violence in front of you, or have violence committed against you. We do not have the luxury of saying, oh, we're going to leave and be okay, because even leaving and trying to have social mobility and move somewhere else, there's new dangers there as a black person. You can be in your area, you move to a nice area, the people there don't trust that you bought your house yourself, or they don't know why you're living there, and they question you. You move up, you try to buy your car, it's, how can you afford this car, and all the rest of it. We also don't have the luxury of saying, oh, if something happens to us, we can go to the police, because even Mercy Morocco, Mrs. There's No Racism, now acknowledges that the police do not take the complaints of a black woman being in danger that seriously. So for me, I just think it's difficult, because I think black people definitely give a shit. But when we talk about taking in information, I think there's a certain amount of emotional currency everybody has. And if you as a black person are constantly bombarded with these images of people that look like you being linked to violence, and people that look like you being linked to financial inadequacy, and people that look like you are linked to ignorance or poverty, when you live in a capitalist world, and everyone that you see that looks like you is supposed to be experiencing trauma or poverty, in your mind, you want to escape from that, because I don't want to be a part of it. So I understand why people almost like, you got to put a wall up, because it's like, if I let it all in.
I hear ya, but you see, for me now, this is where it starts. It starts with the family.
Yes.
It starts in the family. Like, there's an old saying that your first ministry is your home.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I hear
and it's funny that, like, when we're having these kind of conversations, for me, it's like, if we take it back, because I feel like to address these kind of situations, these more kind of bigger situations, we need to look at the granular issues, or where things start from the beginning. And a lot of the times it starts from the family. Now, that isn't to say that we can control everybody else's family. The only thing you could do is control your family and do the best that you can do within your own home, and hope that once you put your children out there, then they could be a good enough representation for good morals and so forth, that they attract like, and then we're having more, it's like a marginal gain situation, whereby little by little, people are contributing and becoming more mass, and then what we're recognized for in, say, 30, 40, 50 years' time, and I know that sounds like a long time, but it really isn't.
No.
People are looking at us more favorably as a community and a culture. We are able to not be at fault for everything, you know what I mean? And be the primary beneficiaries of what we birth in terms of culture, music, entertainment, all these things, and not always be like pushed to the back. So let's let them create it all, but they're not the primary beneficiaries. You know what I mean?
And that happens all the time. And
all of these things, sorry to cut, all of these things for me starts with simply with your home. Yeah. Looking after your kids. Like, so even, again, you know, people split up and whatever, but an interesting story I'll talk to you about, but people might split up, people might whatever. But the point being is, if you've got children with somebody, then you've got to make sure you lean in heavily. Because, I mean, even I was reading another study the other day about fatherless homes, and it said that children with two parents households are, and I can't remember the stats, but are less likely to end up involved in the criminal system. A single parent home with a father, the child of that father, the children of that father are just as likely not to be involved in criminal activity or engage with the justice system as if they were in a two-parent household. But if a child from a mother, like just a mother, single-parent household, one mom, they're the ones that are more likely, massively, to be involved in drugs, guns, gangs, all that type of thing, and, you know, engage with the justice system. And to me, that just shows the importance of a father. Then, you know what I mean. So, okay, you don't necessarily, and I know a lot of people ain't gonna like to hear that. You know what I mean, because they're gonna probably think that we're discrediting the job of the women or what women do.
I could push back on it because I have like, I suppose, a rebuttal to that, and that is that I think two things. First of all, I think that there used to be the old saying that I think it takes a village to raise a child. And I think that the notion of the village has definitely disappeared over time. Not just within our community, but communities in general. I think that people are a lot more individualistic. And there's also like a fear where before, you know, people say all the time, if I was doing badness on road and someone my mum knew saw me and it got back to her, I know it's a madness when I get home. Whereas now I think people are less inclined because they're almost afraid of children. They feel like this generation is lost, and people are less likely to step in and try to reprimand or discipline children or just give them drop them any jewels or anything like that, because I think a lot of people are just focused on their own, just treading water in economically and the rest of it. It's harder for people to care about people at the moment. I think so far as the single mother thing, I think that I definitely hear what you're saying, and I think that, you know, a paternal influence is important. But going back to my previous point, I know a lot of people I grew up with maybe didn't have fathers, and people in my family didn't have fathers, but there weren't like no male role models.
Right.
So it wasn't like there's no one who can come and talk to me and, you know, provide me with badge you up, help you to manage your emotions as you're growing into a man and managing hormones, because that's a big part of it as well. It's just becoming a man. And I think that what that has led to in particular has been for these young men who have been deprived of paternal or even fraternal, like an older brother sometimes can be just as effective. Positive male influence.
Definitely.
I think that they've been so deprived of that. The main problem we're dealing with now, especially in like the last 15 years, is that people have allowed for screens to raise their children.
Right.
So even going back to the example of Axel Rudibakar, like looking into the story, he had spent a lot of time in isolation, particularly during the pandemic. He had social disorders, didn't know how to interact with people, didn't know how to approach people, had become very withdrawn and was going online, became obsessed with the images of violence, stylized violence he was seeing online. Then began to listen to the rhetoric of a lot of racist rhetoric, a lot of anti-black rhetoric even, misogynistic rhetoric, and this crisis was deepening. And the more he looked at stuff, and even had said things like he needed to learn how to delete stuff off his phone because he was embarrassed about what was on there and stuff like that as well. So had become obsessed with that. And I mean, you know, I just think that some people like him, he is just psychologically unwell, probably not fit to be in society.
It's a very good point that you raise in terms of like the screen time, especially. You get what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's like screen time is replacing time that you would have with parents and discuss.
Before, everyone used to watch TV in the same room.
Right.
So if your kids saw something that might be confusing, you could explain the context to them. Or you could say to them, you can't watch this.
Or turn it off.
Or turn it off, we turn it off.
Bedtime or whatever it is.
You got to go to bed or not be in the room.
I remember those days.
Right.
You get me? Like,
but now, if you tell your kid to go to bed, they can go in the room with a phone. And these phones and these screens,
access to everything.
This access, like I said, the level of information people are having access to is clearly very unhealthy because there's no stopping. It's perpetual. Like even if you sat up and watch TV at night, they used to tell you, "Hey, it's 2 o'clock. Go to bed. What's wrong with you?" If you want to stay on your phone and not sleep, your phone will facilitate that as long as you got a charger, and that is a problem. That's a problem that is not good for kids' minds. So I think, so far as the community, I think that's a problem. Is that we have. Maybe there's a level of assimilation rather than integration where we've just stuck ourselves into this culture of you don't have to care about other people's kids. You don't have to care about children in your community. You don't have the social responsibility of telling the youngers how they should carry themselves. And, you know, youth workers are scarce because that's all closed as well.
You know, this is the thing.
Yeah.
Like just to go back to a term I used earlier, marginal gains. Now for those people who don't understand the term, it's basically, or put an example to it, if you want to improve something by 100%, you don't take one facet of that thing and improve that wholesomely by 100%. You can take 5 things and improve it by 20%, or 5 things by 20%, and you'll get your 100%. What do I mean by that? Essentially, what you have is a marginal loss situation because you have less males in the home or less male role models. You have the community centres closed down. You have the increased amount of screen time. All of these things that are adding up. So it's not just one problem, which is important to point out as well. So reading that statistic, and this is the thing, sometimes statistics can skew things because it can make you lean in on one thing when really there's so many other factors to consider. But that, for me, is valid points, you know what I mean? And it's, again, but it does bring it back to the family thing for me because it's like you have to be aware of these things. And it's funny because I never had any godchildren until I was about 25, and to be honest with you, I weren't interested in having any godchildren. And then people in my family started having babies that were the same age as me, and then were like, "I want you to be godfather," and I'm like, "Why?" Because at some point I'm going to need, especially the males, I'm going to need a positive male role model, and I'm like, "But I'm here. I'm here anyway," and they're like, "Nah, I want you to have the title, so that you know what it is that you need to be doing." And I'm like, I hear it, I do hear it, because
it gives you a sense of responsibility as well,
right? That
you're responsible for this child. Like as a godfather, like obviously got godsons and goddaughters, you feel responsible for that child as well, and there is an element of esteem that comes with that,
right?
And obviously people have moved away from church and stuff, and I don't necessarily think people necessarily have to be religious, but like I said, in terms of culture, I grew up with that, knowing that, like, you know, like I said, acting a certain way, if my dad's friends saw me or something like that could get back to your family and you're in trouble. And I think that's something that's kind of, that's kind of diminished over time. People don't care. Like I said, licks. Before that, they could lick you themselves. And then when your parents told them, and if your parents found out that someone else had to discipline you, you get extra discipline on top of that for the embarrassment you brought to your own family. And obviously this is something that's frowned upon, but you could argue legally it's frowned upon because of, and I'm saying child abuse is okay, because it's not. You don't necessarily have to be, I'm not saying that I'm advocating to beat no one's children or anything like that, but I'm saying that there was a certain level of responsibility from all parties. I know I could act a certain way outside my house where people who knew my family could see me, and older people knew that they had a responsibility to provide an environment that was conducive to children being brought up properly, aside from their parents, because it's like, I care about your parents, so I owe it to them that if anything did happen to them, I would have a level of responsibility for their children or be able to help them out if they couldn't do their duties. So that's why I say, like, we talk about the single mother thing, and I think that obviously there is a certain level, people argue a lot about how that's glamorized and if there's a glorification of the status of being a single mother. But I also think on the other hand is that there's almost like this thing where if you are a man that continues to have children with women, but you got money,
Yeah.
that's okay. And I think that there's a lot of stuff that comes with rearing children and providing care for children and raising children that money cannot buy. And one of those things is your presence.
Yes. And not just presence, just like, all right, we're physically in the same room. Here's an iPad, I'm over here playing PlayStation. Or here's an iPad, I'm upstairs doing my whatever it is. You have to be conversate.
Yeah.
Like, walk through life with your child if you're a man.
Yeah.
You get what I'm showing you? And women, please do, because I know there's so many situations, and I don't wanna kind of lean in on this too much to say that this is the biggest problem, but it's a big problem in women weaponizing their kids when it comes to fathers that do want to be in their lives. You know what I mean? If a guy decides he doesn't want to be with you, please try not to weaponize your child against the father, because your children will be richer for the presence of a father that wants to be in their life.
Yeah.
And I've seen some issues where, you know, kids have been expelled from school because of behavioural issues, because of the foolishness that's going on.
Acting out at home, you're acting out. And it's worse for children from our community, because no one is going to look into the background and context as to what could be causing this child to have these acute instances of bad behaviour, or struggling with adjustments, or just acting out, or they've got their own issues of because it's when children's parents break up, that's also traumatic. And sometimes people tend to downplay that, because it's like the kid will be okay, and a lot of time children understand more than we give them credit for, and that can definitely have an effect on them. Like even if your parents divorce amicably, sometimes that can affect children. And I think these are things that, you know, I think it's suggested a lot of the time now that your kids are like a possession, and there's a lot of us who are like, well, I got kids, but I still got my own life. Do you know what I mean? And when people aren't as open to the sacrifice of having children that like they used to be.
Is it a sacrifice though?
To have a child?
Yeah.
Oh, definitely. It is a sacrifice, but it's a sacrifice that we all have to be responsible for. Like, you sacrifice your free time, you definitely sacrifice a lot of disposable income.
Yeah. I mean, I guess from an income point of view, but like, I have friends who have children. I've got no children. I know you have children.
Yeah.
I have friends who have children that so enjoy the journey with their children. Not to say, they're brethrens, that's my brethren. It's more a case of, like, I'm enjoying where you are as a child, and I'm enjoying teaching you and being with you along the journey. Not to say that physically you're not making a sacrifice. You have to change nappies, or you have to take them to school, or you have to do... That's not what I'm talking about.
No.
I'm just talking about the general kind of, okay, this is a new journey. This is I've done... Why not? Yeah. This might sound like a mad concept, but why not? I'm a man. I've spent from my late teens, I want to say, to maybe early 30s, doing my thing, however that thing looks like.
Yeah,
boom, now.
Things are done.
Yeah, you get me? Man done his thing, whatever. So the point is, now, I've done my thing. Now I've got children. Yeah. How about, okay, this is a change. Let's embrace it more, like, you know what I mean? I remember fathers that would like be like, yeah, man, this is what.
But I think that's a learned behavior. And I think it goes back to the point you made before, that there's people who, I think there's a certain elements of how you're able to conduct family life and manage those dynamics. You have to be taught that.
Right, yeah.
And if you come from, because a lot of these issues are transgenerational. Yeah. Like, if you've not grown up in a household with a father, the idea of having to continue your family without a man being present is going to be normalized. Yeah. If you grew up in a household where you didn't have a father, knowing how to act like one is something you may struggle with as well.
And you know what? And I'm going to say this as well, because one of my troubles, right, was not having enough male role models and actually trying to, or learning how to be a man out on the road. Yeah. So it was boys teaching me. We were all teaching each other. And going the wrong way. Yeah, and just doing the wrong shit.
It's the best. And a lot of time for our community, a lot of time it's the best we can do if it's absent. But it's also, we deal with, like, the social ills is that for men in particular, for me, I feel like men and masculinity, what makes a man feel like a man could be your occupation, what I do for a living, and how I'm able to provide for my family. And we're coming from a community where we have been marginalized from that for a very long time. And so when you are treated like you can't become an adult in society, it's hard to step into that role. And I think that's something we have to discuss as a community, is that when you don't feel that you're able to be in the grown folk masculine circles, like, we are underrepresented in politics, we're underrepresented in economics, as whether we're CEOs. So all these roles where we call patriarchy, where men hold these dominant positions within society and can dictate the direction of said society. We've been outside that for a very long time. And I duly believe myself that when you feel like you can't assert yourself as a man in your job or in your rank, then what you do instead is, for us, we tend to try and demonstrate our masculinity through our sexual prowess. Like for a lot of our people in our culture, is like, I got enough kids because I'm a virile man. I got 5 sons because I'm make that. I'm make man. And for some of us, we feel like that's enough, and that is our indication of masculinity. And I think that's something we got to address as men. We move away from that model because even though we stigmatize single mothers, the way we talk about man that's got pure kids about, we don't give it the same kind of stigma that we probably should. We try to like make single mothers like pariahs. Like, you have made a mistake in our society, or you're bringing us down.
You know what?
But that's how some people are. But I'm saying with man that just go around irresponsibly making children.
I want to make this point though.
Yeah.
I think that we should big up, like, even if they're getting it wrong a lot of the times, the only thing that I can't really side with is if they are weaponizing the children. But other than that, like, I've in some case been with single mums and seen how difficult it is, and the dad's up the road and he's out every Saturday night spending peas and pull-ups and all kind of foolishness, you get me? And the mum's still just doing it, bro. So I rate single mums, even if they're getting it wrong, because they are trying their best. But the ones that weaponize their kids, that's the ones where I just feel like...
Yeah. We should use that as a separate thing, though, because I don't think that is a thing where you do it because you're a single mother. I think that's a personality trait. That there are some people that can just be naturally selfish, and if they can use their children or any other selfish means to get what they want, because some people are just spoiled, innit? And some people have learned that being hostile gets them what they want.
But I feel like it's still separate to the initial thing that I brought up, which is, you know, single mothers versus 2-parent households, and
definitely,
you know, households with a father in, regardless to, you know, the amount of males. I'm just talking in that simple segmentation, how the kids fare, and they fare a lot better with the inclusion of their father.
Absolutely.
You get what I'm showing you? So that's just a family dynamic kind of point for, I feel like, people to just take away and just know, okay, although we do have the additional things that you mentioned, like screen time, like community centres not being, you know what I mean? All these other things.
I don't think those things are across community in general, but so far as our community, I do agree with you. I think that, like, the absence of 2-parent households is an issue, but I just think I think personally it's important to look at the circumstances that are allowing for these single-parent homes to flourish. Because when I was in school, for example, some of my friends, their dad would live with their mum, but they weren't like legally married. So because of that, there would be more economic benefits for them, because they say they live in a single parent household.
That's a whole different conversation.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is that, like, it's weird that a government financially incentivizes people to not be with somebody rather than rewarding people financially for being married. Like, if there were more tax breaks, or you were able to get like less stamp duty, or, do you know what I mean? If your stamp duty or your legal costs were cheaper on a home if you were married, or if you played like had received tax credits and more rebates for being married, there'd be a lot more people that would understand the economic benefits of being with somebody. But also, I think it's also...
And because, also, I mean, to take away from that as well, or to follow on from that, is what can happen after marriage. So if you do get divorced, how economically unbeneficial it is for a man in particular to be married. It's like, right, you know, that she can dip into this pocket and, you get me, go and do... And it's like, the system's not necessarily fair. When it comes to men regarding marriage or children, and I've seen both. So for me, it's a case of, okay, you're disincentivizing people from getting married on the front end, but then even when you look at examples, I mean, there's a few good examples of like famous footballers that have been taken to the cleaners. You get what I'm showing you? Like, mad. And it's, when you consider what the woman has brought to the table, you've been looked after marriage, but then you want more, and you're going and dipping into a man's pocket, and the man's having to give you X amount of dough. To me, that's mad. You get me? When you've been looked after, and you don't necessarily have the need to have, I don't even want to quote numbers because people might be able to draw the correlation. You get me?
So what's that? What alimony is to start cussing?
All them kind of ones there. But yeah, man.